So I'll start out talking because we're all here to hear Carol talk. My name is Ann Ford. It's my honor and my privilege and my pleasure today to interview my friend Carol Finch at Elder Wisdom. Carol and I have been friends since 2018 when I moved back to this area. She was one of my first friends. We bonded over widowhood, but we soon discovered we had lots of other common interests and that we really like each other and had a lot of fun doing things. So that makes this really special for me today. So I think we'll get started.
Okay.
Carol, I know that you have grown up in this area, lived here most of your life, except for a notable exception. What was your family like when you were growing up?
Well, I was an only child, actually, for 8 years until my sister came along, but I had a large extended family in the area. My grandparents on my mother's side migrated to here from Italy, and I was very close with them. My father's family was in Pennsylvania, also a large family, so I had lots and lots of cousins, even though I didn't have siblings. Not loud enough? Oh, okay. Okay, so I grew up basically on the south side of Binghamton. This is my hometown. I've lived here for 75 of my 78 years. People kid me, they say, you know where everything is, and I think, yeah, I know where everything was, too. This area has definitely changed a lot. It was a good childhood. I grew up on the south side of Binghamton. I still love this area for the hills and the trees and the change of seasons and all we have to offer. I just think it's the best place. Even though my family has left the area, I'm in no hurry to go anywhere.
You grew up in Binghamton and you alluded to the fact that it's changed. What was it like in the 1950s when you were growing up?
In the 50s and the 60s, it was a booming, prosperous town. We lived on Mill Street, and I could walk across the Exchange Street Bridge, and there were movie theaters and shops and all kinds of specialty shops and restaurants and bakeries, and the library was there, so it was pretty idyllic. Of course, back in the days, you know, your parents sent you out and said, be home for dinner, whatever.
Yeah.
So we could roam around the downtown area, and it was lovely. It really was.
And you grew up Catholic in an Irish Catholic neighborhood.
Correct.
And went to parochial school, I think?
Yes. Our backyard on Mill Street backed up to St. John's Playground. So I just had to go around the block to go to church, and I was there from kindergarten until 8th grade. Back in the day, we had the nuns, and it was a very nice community to grow up in, really. Most of the kids were Irish and had huge families, and I was a little bit jealous of that. You know, they had like 9 siblings or whatever, but I expect they were probably a little jealous of me. I had my own room, so you know, I guess it goes both ways. I would say my early years were centered around what they call the 3 F's: family, faith, and food. And that really is the way it was in a big Italian family. The family didn't speak Italian, though, so I really never learned, and my mother never learned to speak Italian. They wanted to become Americans, and so they learned English right away. And that sort of, looking back, kind of fits into where my interest started to blossom, I guess, in working with immigrants and helping people learn the language.
And we'll come back to that. Since we're talking about growing up in a Catholic environment and going to parochial school, the question arises, when and why did you stop being Catholic?
Well, yeah, it was really ingrained. I mean, I was baptized when I was weeks old because back in the day, you did not take the baby out until they were baptized in case, God forbid, something happened. They wouldn't go to heaven if they were not baptized. And then I made my communion at age 7 and at Catholic school. That was a big deal. The Mass was still in Latin. You went to communion. If you didn't go to church on Sunday, that was a mortal sin. You had to go to confession and confess it. And looking back, I remember being 7 years old and going to confession. I didn't have any sins. And I used to make up things. I lied. I disobeyed my parents. And so there was a sin already. So that was kind of weird looking back on it. And then I did my confirmation. Kept going to Catholic Mass because my family did until I started college, I think is when I started questioning the faith and, whether it worked for me. And unfortunately, I didn't have any alternatives either. And through the years, I looked for other churches that nothing seemed to fit. I wound up raising my kids basically without a religion.
I could relate to that. Now, you told me that you moved to Johnson City after elementary school. Mm-hmm. And then I assume you went to public schools after that. What was that like to make that transition?
Yes. In 8th grade, my parents bought a house in Johnson City, a single-family home. We had lived in a twin with my aunt and uncle living upstairs, and we lived downstairs. So we moved when I was 13, and that was a difficult transition at the time. Everybody in Johnson City had gone to school from kindergarten up to 8th, 9th grade together, and I really felt like an outsider. I spent 1 year at the junior high and then went to the high school, and I didn't enjoy high school all that much. So I was kind of anxious to get out of there, and then an opportunity actually came up. Harper College in those days was offering a program where you could spend your last semester of high school at the college, and they were also on a trimester. So I got an early admission and started in probably January, and you could go year-round and get your degree in 3 years. Unfortunately, that didn't work out for me. I didn't do all that great in college. I guess I started making more friends and doing more partying. And I was at a disadvantage. I think our school didn't offer what most of the kids came from New York City area, Long Island, and their schools, I think, were much more advanced. They had a lot more background in, literature that I didn't know. I took a lot of French, and they were already speaking a lot really good French, and I thought psychology might be my area, but the program there wasn't about human psychology. We had to train our rats to do something, and I have a phobia of rats. So you're in a dark room with this rat trying to make it, do something and give it a pellet, and mine never did. So it was like I got a D in psychology.
Oh, no.
That was the end of my psychology major. I wound up in sociology.
So how far did you go then?
Well, actually, I did meet my Prince Charming in college. And he was, handsome and very smart and charming, and I was in love or lust or whatever it was. And I dropped out of school after a couple of years and went to work. And then we got married when I turned 21. And I was working, and he stayed in school. He was in physics and was going to get his graduate degree. So I was the one that was bringing in the income.
So another case of the wife putting the husband through college?
Right.
Yeah, those were the days, huh?
Those were the days.
You said you worked. What did you do?
This and that, secretarial type jobs. I worked at IBM for a while. My dad was an IBMer. And so during the summer, actually, you could get a job if you're the child of an employee. So I did like quality control on circuit boards, and we'd look for places where the welding thing would break and you'd have to fix that or whatever. It was entry-level manufacturing work. So, and then when I decided to just stop with school and work full-time, I got a job at Buckingham Manufacturing as the receptionist. But then IBM hired me again. An opportunity came up, and I was in the area where we did microfilming of engineering changes. And the engineering changes were on these huge paper, what do you call it, blueprints or diagrams of some sort. And you'd have to take them and take a picture of it. So that was pretty boring work, but
I was just going to ask you about that.
It paid better. I thought I got to find something else other than that. So, but then I got pregnant, and I eventually went back to school. But in the meantime, the Vietnam War was going on, and my husband, after a year, I guess his number came up, and they were drafting people. So he decided to join up rather than get drafted and go to officer candidate school. He didn't discuss that with me first. So that should have been a red flag right there. But, that's what we did. When he first went to basic training, I went and lived with my parents for a little while, and I think I did a semester of school then. And then I joined him, and we went from Fort Benning, Georgia, to Fort Bragg, where he was in he was a Green Beret. And then we were stationed at Fort Knox for a while, and then he did very well in his training, so he got to kind of pick where he could go. So we went to Germany and spent 2 years in Germany. So that was really an adventure for me. I loved that part of it. And we had a built-in group of friends there and got to travel a lot. The guys would go out on maneuvers, and they might be gone for 6 weeks, though. So the wives got together, and we did some traveling, and it was a fun time, and I think it helped my self-confidence that I could actually get on a plane and fly over there by myself, find an apartment, get by in a foreign country. Not that I ever really learned German, because everybody spoke English, basically, but it was fun. After a couple of years, though, he was fed up with the Army and asked for a discharge, and that was allowed at that time. So we came back, lived across the street from my parents in Johnson City, and I got pregnant. I'd wanted to get pregnant. My real goal in life was to have a marriage and children and, the house with the white picket fence. But I had some fertility issues. And wouldn't you know, once we got out of the Army is when I got pregnant, when we had no insurance and no jobs. but we were very pleased to welcome our son. After that, I would have liked to have another child, but again, I didn't get pregnant, so I thought that was a sign that I should look into adoption. So when Skylar was 4, I guess, we decided to go to DSS and try to give a home to a child that needed a home. And Heather was placed with us at 19 months old. And that was a wonderful experience. She was a sweet little girl, but she had some issues, which DSS didn't tell us a whole lot about the issues you can run into with an adoptive child who's almost 2 years old already and has been abandoned several times. So she had some behavioral issues growing up, and Kyle left in, I'm trying to think when, maybe 81.
Kyle was your husband.
Yes, Kyle was my husband. And we were separated for a while. Then we decided to give it another try in 82, I think, and it still didn't work out. So after that, I was a single parent with the kids.
How did you manage that?
Well, I was lucky enough to have my mom and dad around, so they were helpful as far as, babysitting. And my dad was wonderful in providing a male role model for the kids. And I found various jobs. I was looking for what are my real interests, because, back in the day, it was you're going to be a secretary, a nurse, a teacher, probably. None of those things were really working for me, but I did enjoy cooking and food and learning about that kind of stuff. So I thought, maybe I want to be in the restaurant business. So the entry-level position was, to be a waitress. So I was lucky enough to get some nice jobs, and I've worked at nice restaurants. Well, I started at the Fountains Pavilion, where we did banquets, and that was really hard, but it gave me enough experience. My next waitress job was at Chateau Neuf du Pape, which was a French restaurant in downtown Binghamton. And then I got a job at the Roaring Fork. I worked at C.C. McKay's, which was in the old press building for a while, the Vestal Steakhouse, Copperfields. So they were nice restaurants, and you made pretty good money and didn't have to work a lot of hours. So, and I liked it. And they also let me be a pastry chef for a while, so I could make the desserts and sell those too. So that was kind of fun. But it never got into management or anything like that.
I remember all those restaurants you mentioned. They're all
gone.
closed. Do you have any responsibility for that?
I'm not responsible.
I'll take your word for it. You told me when we were talking about this that it took you a long time to find your purpose in life, but you did. Tell us how that happened and what it led to.
Yeah, I'm not sure there was a time. I don't know, it might have been last year or something.
Well, this will be a short interview then.
Yeah, you go into, as a youth, maybe thinking this is the way your life is going to go. Only, I know mine didn't. I don't know about the rest of you, but it's not a straight line. You kind of go this way and zigzag. At one time, I started a business, actually, and I called it the Task Force. I thought this was a brilliant idea, where we would do like errands for people that were professionals that didn't want to pick up their laundry or buy their groceries or whatever, pick up the kids from school. I would take people to doctor's appointments, and I thought if I could make this work, I could hire people to actually do the tasks for the task force, and I would just be the one that took in the requests and scheduled things, but it never grew that big. And I actually gave up the idea when I married my second husband.
How did you meet him?
When I was single, this might have been a turning point, actually. I joined a group, it was called University Singles, and it was active in this community for quite a few years. And it was a place where if you had a 4-year degree and you were single and had interests, you could go to activities as a group. It wasn't, for dating in particular. But, I'm interested in the theater, say. You could get a group of people your own age, basically, and buy a bunch of tickets or go out to dinner or, to different activities. So that was a nice way to meet people. And it was also a confidence builder for me because, I was I was in my 30s and I looked pretty good still. So finding dates was easy. And, I just thought when your husband leaves, you feel pretty depressed.
Yeah.
And like you're not very desirable. But it was good for my self-confidence. So that, I guess, was a turning point. It was like, yeah, I can have a life without him.
And had you achieved your 4-year degree by then?
Yes.
How did
Actually,
that
I was
happen?
pregnant with Skylar when I got my 4-year degree.
And did you go back to Harper College for that?
Yes, I did. I did finish.
So we were talking about finding your purpose in life.
Finding my purpose. Oh, okay. So while I was married with Jean, I wasn't working outside the home, and I was doing volunteer work here and there.
Like what were you doing?
I actually took the training at hospice and became a volunteer with them. And basically what they trained volunteers what to do was mostly respite for the families. And you would go in and the caregiver would have a couple hours to spend doing whatever. I found out that I wasn't all that comfortable, though, with necessarily sitting with the dying people. Because oftentimes they're in a lot of pain, and if you had to move them or something, it was like, oh, I can't do this. I was not made to be a nurse. I don't deal well with people that, are in pain. But I kept on as a volunteer, and I learned so much there. That was a real eye-opener. It was a wonderful program. It was very multidisciplinary approach to care. So the nurses, the aides, the doctors, the social workers would have meetings about the families. And I spent enough time there that I got involved in that. And I was working with the social worker who was in charge of bereavement. And the bereavement piece of it is basically for the family, both during the time the person is dying and afterwards. So I found that I was pretty good at doing that. And unfortunately, while I was working as a volunteer, the social worker's own little girl died. She got hit by a car at 5 years old.
Oh.
So Kathy took off time, and I just stepped into the position, basically, and ran it. And when she decided not to come back, they hired me. But it was only a part-time job. It wasn't enough. So I got another job at the hospital. They were doing a research study on like people that use the emergency room when they shouldn't be using the emergency room. It's like there weren't like walk-in clinics like we have nowadays where you can go and you don't need the emergency room. So people would go to the emergency room instead. And the study was supposed to help you figure out how do we get these people to find another kind of care. So it was a lot of statistical stuff. It wasn't all that interesting. And I thought, I'm not going to get anywhere unless I have my master's in social work. So then I decided I would go back to school and work part-time and get my master's, so I did go to Marywood. So I finally wound up in social work. So now people say, well, what did you do? I say I was a social worker. But it was only for a short part of my career, actually. I got a job at Catholic Charities, but I didn't like that job either. That was like a volunteer coordinator for a new program they were doing, and the program was finding volunteers who would go into people's homes that needed some extra help with groceries, but they weren't going to pay the people to do that. And I don't know, I just didn't enjoy that, so I found another job at the children's home in specialized foster care. And that was very interesting work. Suzanne worked with me, actually.
What did you do in that job?
Started out with training the foster families, recruiting and training foster families, which is very interesting. We would take kids from DSS who were in foster care, but they needed extra help because they had trauma, they had behavioral issues, maybe health issues or whatever. And it was like more intense foster care. The social workers had to go out at least once a week to each home and check on the kids. So when people would say, oh, it must be hard working in hospice, I would say, no. Compared to foster care, working with dying people, I mean, we all die. That's a normal thing. Working in foster care is much harder. It's heartbreaking to see these kids and what they've been through in their young lives. So that was a kind of a burnout job.
How long did you do that?
I think about 7 years. Eventually I was actually I don't know what you call it, the boss, the manager, I guess, of the department, which is a burnout job too. I don't like management. And then I met Gary.
And then you met, oh, right, well, let's go to that.
Yeah.
Before we go there, you told me you had some health issues in the late 90s. What happened and how did you adjust to that?
Yeah, well, it was after I met Gary, actually. We started dating in 95, and I was working at the children's home, and I was diagnosed. I was 50 years old, and I thought, I never go to the doctors. I probably should have a physical. And I went to the doctors, and it was Good Friday. And they did some blood work, and I got a call that afternoon, and somebody asked me, do you have AIDS? And I said, no, I don't think so. Well, you need to get to see your doctor on Monday, the blood work. There's a problem. Now, why they would call me and say that, and I have to wait till Monday, is still like puzzling to me, because I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't tell my family, but I told Gary. Turns out I have leukemia. And these numbers were like multiplying like by tens every day. But it turns out I was so lucky that I don't know what possessed me to do what I did, that I was there at the right moment in time. They caught it so quickly. I immediately got into a hematology oncologist, and I was in a chronic phase of myeloid leukemia, and they immediately put me on interferon, and it worked. The numbers stopped going up. At the time, it was like, am I going to die? But I had worked at hospice, and I think I had a pretty good idea. And I thought, well, if I am going to die, I know how I'm going to spend the rest of my life, because I've figured out what's really important from these people that I worked with. But I didn't die, and here it is, like 30 years almost later. I'm still on a chemotherapy drug that I take every day. Then about 5 years later, I almost died from a heart attack, and I had to have emergency bypass surgery. So I told my doctor, I said, I'm so lucky I dodged 2 bullets. And he said, a lot of people wouldn't think of it that way. But
Clearly,
I
you're a
think that
survivor.
shows I'm an optimist, really.
Yeah, I'm sure that helps.
Yeah, it's my coping skill. Like, okay, it could be worse, right?
You've mentioned Gary a couple times. I think you want to talk about Gary.
Yeah.
And I knew Gary for years before I met Carol because we both worked at BCC. He was in charge of the foundation, and some of the things I do required money that he provided. So, and he was a sweetheart. So tell us about
Everybody
Gary.
loved Gary. Well, we met through hospice. At the time, his wife died of cancer, and he became a hospice volunteer, but he didn't work with the patients. He was on their advisory board, and he became the president of the advisory board. So I met him. We worked together basically, and he was interested in the bereavement end of it, and he thought there should be a group, a men's-only bereavement group, because the bereavement groups tend to be dominated by women. More women are widowed early, and more women, I think, are willing to go to a support group. So he did. He started a men's group, and I couldn't be involved in that, obviously. So I just used to kid him that I was his boss. And then we just started hanging out together and had a relationship for quite a few years. And then in 2000, we decided we would get married. And we were looking for a place to have the ceremony. And his brother was a member of this church. And also there was an ad in the newspaper at that point in time, and it said, "Are you a UU and don't know it?" It was great, and it had asked all these questions. Do you believe this? Do you think that? And I said, oh, yeah, I think I am. So I came here, and Whitney Harriage was the minister at the time. She was only there for a short time, but she was terrific. She gave a wonderful sermon, and it was just, I know a lot of you all say, it was like coming home. It was where I belonged. And so it was like I found my people.
Yeah, I think that's happened to so many of us, particularly I've been a UU all this time and never knew it. And that happened to me too. So you and Gary got married. Then what happened?
Then I was able to do even more volunteer work. I quit my job and got more involved.
What kinds of things did you volunteer with?
I was an usher at the Anderson Center. I worked with literacy volunteers. I had worked with them back when my kids were little, actually, while I was still married to Kyle. And again, they take in immigrants and you help them learn English. You don't have to know their language, and you work with them on the level that they're at and help them with whatever it is they want to know English for. And I met some wonderful people through that. I'm still good friends with somebody that was my first student. She was from Poland, and she had a couple of young children too. And I helped her with English, and we stayed friends. And when she remarried, I was her maid of honor, and I baptized one of her children. So I tend to stay close to the people that I work with. So then I went back to Literacy Volunteers for a while, did that. And then I got involved with a program through the university with international students. And Gary and I sponsored a few students there. And that's kind of become my passion. Now these are kids, they speak English. They're in college, they've been accepted at a really good university. Our university is known all over the world. It's amazing. And we provide like a local family for them. They don't live with me, I don't have to feed them or anything.
But I know you do feed them.
I feed them all the time. I love to feed people, and they love it. So it's more like helping them adjust to the culture, get to know the area, just have a mom here. When we started, I used to say, I'm like your mom in America, and now I'm like your grandma in America. But they're just wonderful, and I've had students from all over the world, and they're just terrific. Right now I've got 4 that I'm working with, 2 women from Kenya that are working on their PhD in chemistry. A guy from Ghana, and he's working on public administration, and another fellow from India who's working on a graduate in computer science. And they're just terrific, so they become my family.
And I've met some of those students. They're really charming.
Yeah, and they keep in touch with me when they leave. It's really nice.
I'm sure they do. Gary died unexpectedly in 2017. How did you cope with that?
He did. I pulled in all my resources, I guess. I think my mom was my role model. She was always an independent person. And when my dad died, she pulled herself up by her bootstraps and figured out how she could handle things. And I guess she always said, you just do what you have to do. And that's sort of my motto. You know, when you don't have a choice, you do what you have to do. So, yeah, I was certainly capable because I had lived alone and I knew how to run the household. Can't say I liked it. I was lucky enough to have a neighbor that would come and do the lawn and stuff. I could pay him and I could always ask him for things. But, you know, you get tired of asking people to help out or using your friends, whatever. So I moved into the 5 Riverside Drive where we have a maintenance staff that takes care of things, and the things inside of your apartment that you are responsible for, they can tell you who to go to. So that's worked out really well. I don't have to shovel the snow or rake the leaves or worry about the roof leaking or, you know, all those things. So that's been great for me.
So you're very comfortable there.
Very comfortable, yeah.
I want to ask you, what, of all the varied things you've done in your life, what are the things that you're most proud of or that gave you the most fulfillment?
Well, in spite of myself, my kids have turned out great. They're both wonderful parents themselves. I have 8 beautiful grandchildren. Heather has 6 children, 2 of whom she adopted as teenagers.
Wow.
Yeah, she's something else. And my son has 2 beautiful children in Portland, Oregon. My daughter's in Texas. You know, they're strong people. They have good values. They're independent, and they're just terrific. I'm proud of them, and I'm proud of my students.
Yeah. What have I not asked you about that you would like to share?
I guess words of wisdom.
Oh, please.
And I've been trying to think of that. I don't know. I guess just go with the flow. You know, the only thing you can be sure of is change. It might seem like the darkest place now, but there will be a dawn.
I think we heard that earlier this morning.
We did, and yeah, it was a terrific sermon. And also be open to people. Build yourself a community of people that you trust, which is easy to find here. I know I've been in small groups and now chalice circles, and I've made so many good friends that are there for me that I trust, and I can tell them things. And you find out when you tell your secrets, other people have those same issues, and it makes you closer. Mm-hmm. So don't be afraid.
Are you open to questions?
Sure.
Does anyone have a question for Carol? I think I see Lynn.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So Lynn is asking what... Thank you. Thank you
You're
both.
on top of it.
What Carol has learned from the relationships. She had 3 marriages, and if I got that right, Lynn?
Right.
Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. I think as I got older, I was able to recognize that people our age are set in our ways, and you're not going to change anybody, and you're probably not going to change, they're not going to change you. So you accept, that which you cannot change. And so many things are trivial. Just let it go. Does it really matter in the scheme of things? So Gary and I were able to settle into a life where probably his dying wasn't as hard because I already had something outside of him. Like when I was volunteering at the Anderson Center, he wasn't particularly interested in going to some of those shows or whatever. As a volunteer, I could go there, see the show, and he could stay home and do whatever he wanted, or he could go to a circus or a carnival or a thrill show or whatever with his brother. And I kept my friends, which Donna knows when I was married to my second husband. He didn't like my friends particularly. Gary was
so that was
open.
A deal breaker?
I kept my girlfriends while I was married to Gary, and I was able to keep my relationships, so I already had a support system. So many things are not that important. They say don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff.
yeah.
And basically, if you're in a relationship, you love the person for who they are. Don't try to change them.
So the dirty socks on the floor, not a big deal.
Yeah. They're not
Any
a
other,
big deal.
we have a few minutes. Any other questions? Jerry? Oh, good question. Jerry's asking, based on Carol's experience with
Yeah.
immigrants, how does she see the situation in the country now?
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. These kids have so much to offer, and they come here, and now they're very unsure. And so far, I think we've been lucky at Binghamton University. That's such a good resource that we have in this area. If you're not involved, get involved. They haven't been impacted too much. They haven't lost their research money is basically what it boils down to. They are afraid to go home because they may not be able to get back. Although a couple of them did go back during this latest break, and they did get back in, but they don't know what the future holds. So.
Excellent question. I think we have time for one more, if anybody has one. Yes. Cecily's asking how Carol's experience in this congregation has affected her.
Oh, profoundly. Absolutely. Oh, this is my family. There's just this sense of belonging here. I was a facilitator of a small group for 14 years. So I've become close with very many people here. And I've been the chair of the caring committee since, well, Stan Masters talked me into it, I think the first year that I was here. So I've been involved with that, and it's just very satisfying. I'm so proud of the people here.
Thank you. I think that's a good note to end on. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I love you all.
And we're very grateful for you, Carol.
And I hope my kids are out there listening on Zoom.
They better be. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ann. You did a great job.